Good morning, everyone. On behalf of our team at HBK, I would like to welcome you to How Internal Audits Can Add Value for Manufacturers with HBK Manufacturing Solutions and special guest, Tyler Gargano. Before we begin, let's review a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple tools that you can use throughout the session. All of the engagement tools are resizable and movable, so you're welcome to move them around to get the most out of your monitor space. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A engagement tool. We'll try to answer your questions during the webcast, but if we run out of time, someone will follow up with you later. A copy of today's slide deck and additional help materials are available in the Related Content tool. In addition, we encourage you to download any resources or links that you may find helpful. For the best viewing experience, we encourage you to close any programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause issues. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so if your slides are behind, try pushing F5 on your keyboard to refresh the page. You'll find additional answers to some common technical issues in the Help tool at the bottom of your screen. A recording of today's webcast will be available after the session concludes and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. For more information and insights, please visit our manufacturing section of our Insights page at hbkcpa.com/insights. If you require CPE credits for today's session, you must answer at least 3 poll questions and stay in the session for 50 minutes. We'll send a certificate to you in a few days via email. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Amy.
Thanks, Lori, and good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Reynolds, and I am the Regional Director of HBK Manufacturing Solutions. Today, we are very excited to have Tyler with us as our special guest. Tyler Gargano joined the firm a few months ago and is our Director of Risk Compliance and Controls. He is out of our Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania office, but like many of our Manufacturing Solutions members, he sees clients in our entire geographic footprint. Tyler is the Director of Risk Compliance and Controls, as I mentioned, but what that means is that he specializes in internal audit and business controls, SOX controls, control implementation and transformation, forensics, fraud, operational audits, and other types of consulting. So his skill set is very wide but very focused on that risk compliance and control piece. Tyler does work in a variety of industries, but certainly these topics lend themselves well to manufacturing, and that's why we thought it was important for him to talk to all of you today. Obviously manufacturers can look at their internal controls, can look at their risks, and have a variety of those which should be considered. So Tyler will give us some tips and tricks of what to look at specifically for manufacturers over the next hour or so. So with that being said, Tyler, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks, Lori. Really appreciate it. I think special guest is quite the title. I like that. But thanks everybody for joining. Really happy to be here and be able to share a little bit of some basic level knowledge around internal audits and kind of how it's applicable across manufacturers in a specific fashion. Gonna change slides, gonna kind of run through our agenda today. We're gonna bounce a little bit all over the place today, so just hang tight, and I promise it will all loop back together at the end. But really want to focus on foundations and the value of the internal audit. No matter the shape or the size of your organization, no matter how big, small, where you started, where you're at now, or where you want to be, the value that an internal audit group can bring to your organization holistically. Next, I want to talk about the value of what this internal investigation is. What I'll kind of point to throughout this, this talk today, of what can it do for your company? How can we benefit from it? Next, we'll look at testing strategies. I'm going to get a little bit specific in terms of exact testing strategies. We have a couple of case studies that we're going to run through past examples of what I've seen in manufacturing environments and kind of how we tested and what we're going to do and how we apply ourselves to it. from that internal audit framework and strategy. We're going to touch a little bit on the internal control frameworks and kind of what you should be looking at, scope considerations, and planning throughout your year. As we get closer to that 12/31, considerations for next year should be taking place, and this conversation should be happening now. What's looking forward to in 2023, 2024, and so on, of what's to come. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with just what's going on in the space. ESG and robotics are going to kind of be the two topics to talk about. ESG is the hot topic across every internal audit platform, any internal audit conversation or anything that I see. So going to touch base on that. I've got some exciting stuff today. As noted, please utilize the Q&A. I want this to kind of, if you have questions that come up, please ask me. I have it open on my screen. So if something comes, please feel free to shoot me a question, shoot me a note, or comment in any way. All right, we can get started on the foundations and roles of the internal audit team. So what is an internal audit group, and holistically speaking, what does this look like in a manufacturing environment, and kind of how does this fit into my organization? Is your company a publicly traded company? Is your company a private company? Large or small? Typically, what we see internal audits value in housing is in that public space, but we've come to know over the last 5-10 years, there's just as much play in the private company space as well, if not more. A specific added value into these private companies is where there's just immense value for leadership, for management, to understand what's going on in my operations. How are we getting from A to B and B to C, and what's going on, rather than on that public side, which is still great. It's more of that SOX compliance, where we're looking at SOX controls and SOX testing, and we have to do 10 formalized internal audits throughout the year, and that's kind of how the year is shaped around our internal audit space. And you might get a couple special consulting projects thrown in there throughout the year, but focusing on kind of internal audits mold around every organization is there, and it's useful, and there's immense value add that we can bring to organizations, specifically within that manufacturing space. We'll get into specific details around the additives to manufacturing, but that's where we see the correlation, the extremely beneficial and kind of uniform across the clients, across best in practice, and what we're shaping. This slide, so brace yourself, internal audit's coming. Formalized definition of internal audit is we're an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. I stole that right from Google. The way that I would say an internal audit is how can we help? What's going on? Where are areas that are in your business that you need assistance in? And where are areas that you might not know, or you might not have clarity, or hey, I saw this number on our financial statements and it looks like it could be bad, and why is it bad? Internal audit plays a key role into organizations where we're evaluating controls, and we're looking at governance, we're looking at accounting processes, policies, procedures. So it's not only just that compliance function, we also play into that operational, core, ethical, fraud, any kind of accounting function that you see. We also kind of will have testing and utilize our structures across those. In my years of experience, I started my career in external audit, and then I transitioned from external audit into a business unit lead role at a very large company where I was overseeing products and everything like that. So I stepped out of the accounting world and went into more of a business role. Being in that role, I had exposure to our internal audit group. And the reason why this picture is here is because when I saw the internal audit group, nobody ever wanted to see them. There was no excitement. There was nothing that, people wanted to deal with. It was never anything good, for instance. So then that's why I wanted to get into internal audit, is because I saw the value there. I found that from being on that outside looking in, that there's more here than just a compliance check the box function. There's more, we can help in many different assets in different ways. And across those, my background is in that manufacturing space and in the service space, where that's where we utilize our audit resources across domestic landscapes and as well as international. So, if you have an internal audit team, and I'm sure you have some type of knowledge of what the staffing and what the plans look like amongst your organization, so you have check-in areas where the businesses may not have clarity, or you may want to have that additional testing in. So just looking at strategies and looking at staffing options that are offered, not keeping it in-house, perfectly fine. However, offering, I know our HBK group offers a loan staffing arrangements, co-source arrangement, an outsourced model, and then special project consulting. Loan staffing is going to be where you're going to kind of rent the staff. We'll provide X number of employees that you need help, whether they are internal audit, whether they are have a different specialty that can add value to your organization. Co-sourcing and outsourcing models are just internal audit structures. Co-sourcing is you have an internal audit team, but we need help, we're understaffed, or we bid off whether we can shoot with our scope, we need help getting through testing. And then outsourcing is where we are the internal auditors. And then special project consulting, we'll get into a little bit more details later, but that's just, I have an X issue and I need help with, and we need to have some clarity on. The nice thing about all these staffing models and kind of what's going on with all these is, and the great thing about internal audit is we're 100% on behalf of management. We 100% report directly up through the organization. We have no external exposure. We're not issuing reports to outside, stock and shareholders or anything like that. It's all internal, working on behalf of management, and that's how and why it works. I feel like it's being that additional arm and leg, I think adds that value across. The other great thing, it kind of rolls into all the different staffing options, is the subject matter experts. I know specifically at our firm, this manufacturing solutions group that we have in holistic, to have experts in a space that this is what they do and this is kind of the talk and walk the walk. You're not going to see that a lot. You're not going to get that a lot. So being able to have those on call and on hand, and having just a new or different set of eyes look at your company, look at your operations and what's going on is great value add. And I touched briefly on the public versus private, and I just kind of want to circle back onto this. But, having that focus of I'm a private company or I'm a smaller size company, I don't really consider internal audit. I don't really know what an internal audit source would do. We'll get into some specific cases, but there is value. I just want to kind of reiterate that point of we can conduct the testing and controls the same. We can implement the controls. There's framework there, and we can work amongst that with management and with leadership to find that realized value. I think we have a CPE question. Yes. It's a little bit different. I think you all are going to see a poll question pop up, and I will be tracking the results as the answers are coming in. Give another 10 seconds or so. Make sure you get those answers in for CPE. Okay, so it worked. Good. Which of the following is a role or duty of the internal audit team? Kind of a trick question here, so you can thank me for that. Evaluating the company's internal controls, provide an independent conclusion on an organization's operations, report findings to the PCAOB. Correct answer is D, both A and B. So yes, the 37.5% that answered the evaluate the company's internal controls, you are correct. However, we also provide that independent conclusion on those operations. And we're able to see kind of what is going on as that independent piece. Great. Looking at next, the foundations and roles of an internal audit team. This is just generally speaking kind of what the internal audit team makes up. The next slide, we're going to get drilled into manufacturing. But when looking at the internal audit department, it's we're reviewing those accounting internal control systems. It's a big area where we sit in and where we will focus on is those controls and kind of what's going on within the processes and the procedures of an organization. That's one of the key aspects of an internal is looking at the controls and understanding what's going on from a control standpoint. However, assisting with identification of risks, reviewing the economy and the efficiency of operations, just kind of those additional value adds are great additional add-ons that internal audit groups add in specifically looking at the special investigations, including fraud or ethics, and say something, God forbid, happened at the company. Why, how, when did it get caught? Is there more exposure? Internal audit wears a lot of hats, and that's where we sit and what we do. It's being that liaison and the problem solvers of the organization is what we like to focus in, and also have that compliance and regulation piece as well. So this next slide is drilling into the manufacturing specific environment. It's looking at what makes up this audit group. When looking at manufacturing, on the left side, you're going to see, I think it's be my left, it could be your right, the bubble with the audit and the spikes. There's various bubbles around what this audit makeup is. And a few of the highlights is what you're going to see. Vendor quality, third-party management. I know in the manufacturing space, looking at vendors and utilizing vendors and third parties, are relationships clear? Do we do relationship checks? Are they meeting expectations? Are we getting out of what we're putting in? And does that make sense? Third-party management is a crucial area to success in manufacturing and success for clients across the board, and having that resource to do testing on third parties and to understand what the contract makeup is. Are we in a good spot, and what are we getting out of with this third-party relationship? Contract review, just like I said, looking at third parties, what's going on with their contracting, are we in the right space, and check all the boxes from a legal standpoint and from a regulation standpoint, as well as not going to harm or impact our operations to any capacity. Purchasing process, we're going to get into a little bit later some specifics around purchasing, but purchasing is extremely crucial, obviously, in the manufacturing space. What are we buying? How are we buying it? How are we storing it within inventory? What's going on there? In alignment with handling and packaging, the storage delivery, what's coming in our doors, and do we purchase the correct product, and is it being categorized appropriately? And then finally, just looking at design and control, collaboration, and processing controls. I kind of group all three of those together, and what they would look like is the internal audit function as a whole. Are we doing our testing? Are we doing our due diligence across that? Do we have the appropriate controls and design controls for our specific clients, and what this looks like from a process perspective? And then finally, looking at impacting and testing. I think regularly testing controls is necessary. I think every year there should be scopes of controls, there should be new controls removed due to change, and kind of what the impact is on the organization by adding controls, by removing controls, and looking at testing and results across the board on those controls. The other image that you see on this slide is the conceptual process audit framework. So we have like 5 inputs, 3 outputs. Sorry. Looking at what's kind of going in is our facilities up to speed. Do we have the correct technology in place and systems that are going to make our lives in day-to-day business easier? So our plant equipment. Is the plant and the facility set up to be successful? Do we have the correct structure and layout that our inboarding and outboarding is flowing smoothly? And then the next one would be looking at with whom or your workforce. Are we training people appropriately? Do we have the knowledge space that we're hiring in people that have experience, or say they don't have experience? Are they able to learn it on the run, or learn how we can? What skills do they bring to the table? Input materials should be kind of utilities and energies, or where's my team focusing at? Where are the other areas in the business that we might not be seeing that there's additional energy and effort going into? The how or the process operation, planning and communication. How do we do X, Y, Z? What does maintenance schedules look like? Do we have a preventative maintenance plan in place? What about our safety and housekeeping? Do we have the appropriate guidelines and guardrails for our plan or organization that is going to keep our employees safe? Because at the end of the day, that's one of we're in the business of helping clients and helping people, and we want our people safe, and do we have the right policies and procedures in place to ensure safety? And then finally, support processes, which is going to be the kind of the fifth bucket bucket that we're going to talk about, which would be the auxiliary process, the quality assurance, the production planning, the scheduling, the usage of IT assets. What are the areas in our business that we might not have as A, but it's a very close B? Where are those auxiliary programs at? All of this is going to kind of funnel into this production process, and essentially it feeds over into these two output areas, which is our output materials, obviously, which is what are we getting from our inputs, and what are we putting in is what we're getting out, and then our by what. What is our measurement? What are we looking at parameter-wise? Are we doing any data analysis around what our successes are and where we're falling short at, and where we're at in the big scheme of things? Is the business running as we intended to run? And that's the question that internal audit and what we like to find that value and answer of, hey, X company, you've implemented 20 controls and they're actually not taking place because of X, Y, Z. And this is how we can get back on track. Next, I have so this is going to be extremely specific to manufacturing. A lot of times what I've seen in the manufacturing world is this audit checklist. It might be a little bit small on your screens, but if you print the screens out, the slides out, you'll be able to see them. But it's essentially all it is it's compliance check is what we use in the audit world. I like to do more direct testing within facilities tailored to client-specific needs or wants or audit areas that are in scope. This is taking a general approach to the manufacturing environment that it has a list of questions with high-level answers. Is the process going as intended? Is preparation happening? Is there a review? Is there appropriate sign-off? This is kind of the tip of the iceberg testing, but a lot of manufacturing companies do this. There's nothing holistically wrong with it. We can bite off more here in our testing scope, and that's where this is going to sit. This is a great introduction to testing and a great introduction to answering the question of, do we have checks and balances? Do we have people in the right places? And so on and so forth. I like to use this as a guide to fill in what our testing scripts and testing schedules look like. That will hold truth for years to come as that control is being operating and being utilized. So in wrap up of kind of the foundations and roles here, there's a 5-step plan that I have written out here. What is this audit procedure? Identifying the subject matter experts, whether they be internally or externally. Internally, they're the people that have been there for years. They're the people that know the process, know how stuff should be operating at like the back of their hand. And externally, it's utilizing what offers you have. Do we have people that know inventory better than others? Do we have people that this is where they sit and this is where they work? Yes. That's kind of what that subject matter expert is going to bring, that additional value and this additional set of eyes into your manufacturing process of, hey, you're doing A, B, and C correctly, but we can streamline this to go from A to C or A to finish faster, cheaper, smoother, so on and so forth. Step 2 is looking at document internal control procedures and the reasons for them. I think the reasons for them is extremely important here. Documenting those internal control procedures are just, we should have those established controls, established checkpoints across all of our procedures and process areas. But the why is a great additional add-on, because I can tell you more times than not, I've received, why do I have to do this way? Why is it this way? Why do I have to sign my name on this specific line? So understanding the why and being able to communicate that out to your employees and to your business is extremely crucial, so that it closes that question of, this is why we're doing this, because we want to take a more, conflict resolution approach and understand kind of what's going on within our business from a day-by-day, hour-by-hour standpoint in some cases. Continuously monitor this control effectiveness, continue to test, keep testing throughout years and years, months and months, weeks and weeks. There should be a scope of testing, phase testing, walkthrough, interim, and year end, and keep testing. And I think that's where you're going to find the value out of having that internal resource to be able to do the testing. And then document the monitoring and document those testings. Utilize testing scripts, utilize what you have and what you can do to respond back, and track the responses. Are we doing review audits of areas that failed and looking at where areas we had success at and where areas we failed at, which is perfectly fine to fail in some of these business aspects. I could tell you how many controls. I've tested the same control 7 times and it's failed 7 times for 7 years. But we're improving. We're getting it closer. We're getting it to where it needs to be, and communicating that out to our people and documenting that back across. And then finally, just creating that workflow of internal audit. I mentioned this earlier. Do we have our walkthrough procedure set? Do we have our interim testing set? Do we have our year-end testing set where we understand the workflow? We understand kind of what the internal audit team is doing at any specific time and what's going on there. We have another CPE question. I'm going to try to just push this out once. So, sorry. So, CPE question 2 is, who does the internal audit team report to? External auditors, PCAOB, internal audit director, or none of the above? I think there's just a slight delay in when these are coming out, so I'll give a little bit more time to these CPE questions to pop up so we can get the answers through. Looks like it just popped up, so another 20 seconds I'll give you. Couldn't tell, we're trying something new, so my apologies. Looking at these results, so who does the internal audit team report to? PCAOB got 11.1% of the answers. The internal audit director got 66.7%, and none of the above got 22.2%. Internal audit director is the correct answer here. So as I mentioned earlier, we work internally. We work completely on behalf of management and work with management to answer those conclusions, answer that. Structures of companies are going to be set up a little bit differently. Sometimes there is an internal audit director, sometimes there's not an internal audit director. And in that case, we would just continue to report up, typically be to the CFO and ultimately to the audit committee and to the audit board of that specific company to really get clarity on the scope and where areas within the business and the financials that need assistance and need value add testing to. Next, we're going to transition to the value of the internal audit team and kind of what does internal audit testing mean, or what results will we get. For those of you that actually attended one of my previous webinars, these 2 images should look very familiar. We're looking at enhancements to phases of the audit. That's the whole value add that we bring as an internal audit function. Specifically in the manufacturing environment, it's, is production running? Is production planning going on? We take a risk-based or control-based approach to testing here into what our scope is, and that starts in the initial phases of the risk assessment procedures and understanding kind of what's going on. Are we taking that risk-based approach to our financials to understand we're exposed here because of X, Y, Z, because we have business in X location, or we had a change in procedures at a local plant, or what's going on there. And then to the right, what you see is a process flow map. This is kind of the end output process of what you're going to see. Management will see it and look at the flow of the process. This is kind of how I intended the process to run, and it's confirmed that this is how everything's running. It starts at that risk understanding, and then we implement the controls back across the procedures and the process of what's going on to answer that question. This is, again, would be that deliverable, that value add, where management's seeing, okay, here's where my process is getting initiated, here's where my process is taking shape, here are my control checks and balances, here are my systems that are implemented to mitigate controls or mitigate my risk here, and go on throughout the process of A to B. These process flow maps are great. I stress these highly across all of my clients that we do work with. That implementing these as a strategy is extremely crucial and extremely helpful to all businesses. Looking at internal control testing strategies, so a little bit of a bigger slide here, kind of what we're looking at definition-wise. Internal controls, we identify the wrinkles and where are we at in the operations and what's going on. Is there a wrinkle or is process running smoothly and why? Is it because of the controls we have implemented or are the right controls? Inadequate controls happen, they cause a disruption in that flow in that production process and in our any kind of process in the accounting world or operational world. Good operational internal controls or activities or procedures that show operations are working. It shows that what we're doing is working together and it's feeding across the board from our systems and what's running across. The main goal here is to enhance efficiency, enhance what we're doing. Are we doing it at the right cost? Do we have the right people in the right places and looking across that? When thinking in manufacturing and especially internal control framework, 3 areas pop into my mind, which is inventory, costing, and purchasing. To talk about inventory, obviously extremely important part of our business. Do we have our inventory? Is it settled in the correct appropriate? When looking at controls though, it gets a little bit different where we're looking at counting and we're looking at what's going on. 2 main areas of counting that take place: wall-to-wall inventory and cycle counting procedures. So when looking at wall-to-wall, it is as it's defined. We're starting on this wall and we're going to count every single piece of inventory till that wall. The biggest approach with this is there's that room for human error. Typically, wall-to-walls are done 1 time a year or twice a year, and it's extremely burdensome and it's hard on production. We get people that will do the wall-to-wall counts that aren't working with the inventory most of the time at companies, and that just raises that increase for error that they might not know where the part specifically should be. They know that based on the printout from the system that it should be in spot A or B, but it's not there, but they see it across the board and it's tracked. That's not the appropriate procedure that should be taking place when looking at wall-to-walls. And essentially, when inventory is moving, if we're at a high pace, heavy machinery facility, inventory is constantly moving. It's constantly circulating. It's getting moved by forklifts, getting moved by employees, so on and so forth. Are we tracking that movement of goods? It's very hard to track that back across with wall-to-wall inventory, which then can streamline into purchasing decisions and kind of what's going on. If we have unrealized inventory within our system, is it, back across coming into our books appropriately? It streamlines a slew of answers and questions. Cycle counting, I would say, is considered best practice. It breaks your inventory into manageable pieces. Cycle counting will take place. I've seen it take place at extremely large facilities weekly. I've seen it take place monthly. I've seen it take place daily. It's that way you are getting comfort over your wall-to-wall inventory, but at a very specific, very detailed level. Kind of how cycle counting works is we break our inventory and our items up into various categories. Typically, I see price or inventory value, so our high-priced items will obviously hold higher weight across, and that's typically where we start, and that's where those items are going to be counted more rigorously. They're going to be a lot more focused, and we're going to count those maybe a couple extra times throughout the year, and then so on and so forth as we move down the list of importance of our inventory and of our goods. And not saying that the non-essential or the non-inventory pieces, the places that aren't going to show up on the AB list are important, because those are still going to be counted as part of cycle count procedures. Typically in cycle counting, you'll see the system kind of hit a refresh. It will print out a list of, hey, here's locations you haven't counted yet. Here's detailed breakout of why these areas got pulled based on dollar value or parameters that you set up. Where it gets tricky with cycle counting is implementation. Or if you're going from a wall-to-wall environment count to a cycle counting, it gets a little bit tricky. Management needs buy-in. Management needs people that are also adapt to understanding, I have to count this inventory, it has to be accurate, and the why. So supporting that, getting the support from that initiative, it requires a deeper dive into when looking at the cycle count results. So we're going to have to get a better understanding of why was part A off, why was part B off, what's going on with these discrepancies, and holistically, once you complete a cycle count, so you count 25 items at your warehouse, you're going to then say I'm off by 3. You get direct answers that same day. So you'll understand what's going on with your inventory. Is there stuff going on that should be categorized differently, or should we be realizing our inventory differently, or is there not enough space or storage to store this in an appropriate space? Does it need to be moved within the facility and warehouse? Inventory controls and cycle counting and wall-to-wall inventories, that's where I sit. I love inventory, and I love how it works and where our goods are being stored at and what's moving within the facility and kind of what's the best way to do stuff. Next area it would be around costing. Costing is controls that depend on the type of production that you do, but costing methodology is pretty consistent across what we do. It's, predefined purchases that look across the bill of materials. Typical approach in the accounting world would be standard cost versus average cost. When using a standard cost item, you expense the difference between the price that you actually paid for the part versus the amount you set the cost of the price, or the cost of the part, excuse me. So say we have a part for $10 a unit because we expected that cost during the year. However, our actual price is $12 a unit. That $2 difference is that purchase price variance, and that is what's going to get expensed back across the period for the part that's purchased. Standard costing is used traditionally at larger style companies just based on the sheer amount. Monitoring those purchase price variances is crucial. I can't stress that enough. That's the most important part of, are we getting what we want? Are we purchasing the correct materials from the correct vendors? Are we looking at this over under estimation? PPV should be calculated at every month end. It should be as part of our reporting at month end, if not weekly, as it's being tested and looked back across. Smaller companies will typically use that average cost as that proxy. Typically, it'd be like a FIFO method of the first in, first out. If a part costs you $250 to build, and the second part will cost you $200 to build, and the average cost of those two items would be $225 at the median of those. Companies using that average cost should do a proof out sampling of those parts costing. So kind of checking our system's cost is what that's a fancy way for saying is our system realizing the cost and appropriate value and the appropriate dollar that we're spending for them. Extremely crucial, especially in today's world, as prices are going crazy, prices fluctuating, supply chain issues, what's going on with my goods and where's everything sitting. Looking at our costing and looking at our pricing is extremely important as those prices fluctuate to make sure that we're reporting accurately and we're buying and paying appropriately. Finally, purchasing controls. These are just basic activities that we should be doing in the purchasing kind of activity that's taking place at the organization. Do we have appropriate segregation of duties? Do we have employees that are responsible for making purchases? Are they also not the ones that are receiving the goods, handling the payments to the vendors? Bidding process is extremely crucial here. I've done numerous audits over bidding processes and understanding kind of what is going into what we're buying and how we're getting to there. Paying more might not always be the worst decision as well. If we have relationships where we're going to be able to get product faster, we're going to have to be able to get, we have a better relationship with X vendor. It's really not the worst thing in the world to be spending a couple extra dollars to take that ease off. But bidding reviews and bidding audits in that kind of purchasing bucket of, start to finish is what the internal audit team would do in this capacity is starting, do we have the right people in place? Are they handing it off? Is there appropriate sign off? Are we getting the correct price based on the goods? Are we evaluating all of our inputs that we're getting from a bid perspective and utilizing this back across? And then kind of in summary here, the most important thing is finding that source of the kink faster. What's going on in the business is as we take a control-based approach, we'll be able to identify where that kink is taking place. Say back to purchasing, say that there's been we've bid on 5 different items, or we've had people bid on 5 different items, and we didn't select the best deal because of X, Y, Z, and we've done it 3 consistent times. Kind of why, understanding the why, understanding what's going on in the business. That's what's going to bring that value from that internal control methodology and framework testing back This next slide is kind of what an internal audit team looks like from infancy to maturity. I love this. I think this is kind of one of the bigger reasons why I personally got into internal auditing. I think the 5 buckets up at the top, reacting, discovering, performing, advising, and transforming, are extremely crucial to businesses. I think any business has gone through these stages of life, and I think internal audit lives in these stages of life based on the agility and the maturity of the function that we're working within. Looking at reacting, that's kind of from a process delivery, deadline-driven basis. What's going on? We're just reacting to what the business is doing and what the business is taking place. Discovering steps into that next piece of, we're able to recognize, hey, this is what's going on, or this is taking too much time, or this is costing way too much money. There has to be a better way to do this. Performing is looking at processes of connecting those dots. Well, I do A and B and it gives me C. Can we just streamline this in some capacity? Performing those tests, performing that due diligence to understand that change is imminent and change is possible. Advising is looking at the shifts of identifications and recommendations back across, giving that evaluation, giving that understanding. And finally, transforming is taking that shape of, we're looking at new opportunities. We're looking at various different audit areas that we can look and focus in. And internal audit areas, they transform and they shape kind of what goes on at the organization in terms of testing and compliance function. We have a couple case studies. So these are real world examples that I've faced in manufacturing specific environments. Client A, B, and C, kind of what's been going on. These are going to be focusing a lot more kind of a special project audit that I've done in my past life, and kind of what I've seen at manufacturing clients. So first one we're going to talk on is client A has approached HBK as they're facing production and planning issues. How would HBK address and solve these issues for client A? So when looking at scheduling is kind of what this is looking like. Our production is not meeting our goals and our expectations. So kind of what we would do is utilize a multi-step audit here to resolve these on-hand issues of production and production planning. Review current state procedures and controls, ensure production is going in and going out as intended, and management is being specific on what they want in terms of control-based approach and what's going on within the facility. Evaluate the strategies and the calculations that are going to support that demand request and the supply output, considering scheduling, considering staffing needs and necessities and what's going on there with our staff holistically. Ensure that company systems are operating and data and results are being timely and accurately reported. Are we considering machine downtimes? Are we considering mechanical issues? Or are we considering cleanup? If we're in a food facility in any way, or even a heavy machinery manufacturing, do we have an oil spill and that's going to pause production? Are we ensuring that we have calculated for this, that these will happen? And we'll work to implement those control improvements for production, inventory, and shipping procedures of getting that smoother. Once a truck comes in, are we tagging our asset? Are we, storing it appropriately within the inventory warehouse? Are we then reconciling it back to the system? Kind of all the phases of the life cycle of the asset and the good. Is it taking place? Kind of looking across this production, 5-step approach, very similar to what I've been talking about, is that production plan is based on, accurate, parameters. Is it realistic? Is it good? Does it make sense for our people and for our success as a company? Understand that variations and changes to the process are going to take place and happen. Just like I mentioned, oil spill, downtime, cleanup, machine issues. Production scheduling is based on those parameters as well. So kind of 1 and 3 are going to kind of knock together. Where is our schedule make sense? Do we have people hired to be able to fill this back across? And if they're not hired, are we making changes to schedules that can supply what our company needs to produce? Same thing, is our scheduling being monitored, and then kind of, is this submissions and what we're doing feeding into our IT and into our systems appropriately? From a staffing standpoint, from a production standpoint, and from a goods out standpoint, everything should be correlated in the same system, and everything should be kind of talking together to better understand what's going on in the organization from that aspect. I know staffing's an issue right now, I think across the United States, and understanding that is an issue. It's step one, and understanding that we might not be getting the people as we want to. So taking a look at your scheduling and taking a look at kind of what your production plan is, it's going to be crucial and key of understanding that. So that's everything we would do for client A is look at the testing, look at the controls, looking at our schedules, looking at our systems, is everything feeding appropriately, so on and so forth. Client B has approached HBK facing inventory issues, starting with the product being received and classification of inventory. How would HBK help streamline inventory policies and procedures? So step one, utilize a subject matter expert, manufacturing niche group as well as an inventory subject matter expert that understands product, understands production, understands the facility of kind of what's going on there. Evaluate the current state of inventory controls, start to finish product life cycle of shipment comes in. What are we doing? I mentioned earlier, are we re-tagging the asset with our own asset tags, or moving that into the correct production facility? Are we then reclassifying it within there that it's in the staged and stopped? Inventory methodology, is it feeding back into our system? We even get to the nth level of, does the layout of this warehouse make sense? Are we adding time or adding resources, or is there unsafe conditions within the warehouse that could be causing issues? Remapping plants and facilities, I've done numerous times for many different clients. People are traveling too far to get product that's a high item product. People are, move it closer to X location. And understanding when and how this inventory is being realized. What's our useful life? If we're in the food service industry, how long do we have before this needs to go off the shelf? Understanding scrap, where scrap's being stored, and understanding the movement of fixed assets is extremely crucial, which detailed testing and detailed environments that internal audit brings will answer those questions. And finally, ensuring that those inventory balances are accurate within the system in the warehouse. Can't stress that enough. We talked earlier about cycle counting and wall-to-wall counting. Your inventory is probably one of the most important pieces of the business. So understanding what's going on and do we have appropriate reporting levels through our IT systems is extremely crucial. CPE question 3. Okay, so all right, I think it just popped up. And this one is asking, which of the following would be a deliverable for Client B's internal audit service request? So when looking back at Client B, Client B was around the inventory processes. So what's going on with the inventory? So completed test of controls, formal internal audit report, visual representation of what the new inventory procedures would be, or D, all the above. So if we think back, Client B was having issues around, hey, our inventory is a mess. We're not realizing inventory appropriately. We're not looking at it as we should be. What's this look like? Give it a little bit more time. Okay. So in response, it looks like we have 11.1% around the internal audit report, visual representation of what the new inventory procedures would be, and then D, all the above. So the correct answer is D, all the above. So my 11.1% and 33.3%, you both were correct. However, completing this process of what the firm would do, what an internal audit team would do, we would do those tests of controls. We would look at the controls. We would issue a formalized internal audit report around inventory production procedures, and then we would give that visual representation of what that inventory procedure would be. So final kind of case study that we have here. Client C was impacted by a hurricane. Transportation, operations, and people were all impacted. How can Client C ensure that 1, operations can be recovered, and 2, that there are proper procedures in place for future unplanned natural disasters? Testing resolution here is HBK would conduct a business continuity assessment to ensure that there are appropriate checks and balances implemented for leadership and management to mitigate the risk of natural disasters. So business continuity is an area that businesses should consider. Stuff happens. We just got through Hurricane Ian. Business continuity touches all subjects of if somebody steps on to the facility that shouldn't be there. What's going on? What's our contacts look like? How are we reaching back out to our employees to ensure safety and everything across? In the specific understanding of client C here with this impact of the hurricane and everything, our business continuity assessment would assess the damage, assess understanding, and assess back across what is going on and how we can take what we have and shift back to get business operating as need be. Those business continuity assessments are newish that I've seen, but extremely valuable and extremely useful for cases where we've had issues arise up. Okay, another CPE question. So which of the following would be a test conducted for client C? A, business continuity review, B, internal controls evaluation, C, disaster relief testing, or D, all of the above? Okay, looking at answers here, D, all the above was a correct answer. So we would do a business continuity review, which is correct, my 20% up at the top. Internal controls would be evaluated that are in alignment with the business continuity, and then disaster relief testing is also going to be a part of this package that is delivered to understand what's going on and where the impact is and what we can do. Say there's benefit. I know that the government issued relief for Hurricane Ian for Florida companies and everything like that. Are we available to get that relief and what it looks like? Great job. Some trends. So here's the fun stuff. So our good friend ESG here. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance Information. This is extremely crucial, and I was doing a lot of research on this for many different reasons, but of most recent, the SEC started to explore potential regulation within this diversity and inclusion section of businesses within the past year, and I could foresee this being extremely more important. So looking at the three phases of ESG, environmental, which is our climate risk, our carbon emissions, our energy efficiencies, use of natural resources, pollution, everything amongst those lines. Social, which is going to be our human capital, our labor relations. If we have an international business, kind of what's going on with the border, FCPA, human rights activities, and everything amongst those lines. And three, governance, which is going to be for diversity, corruption reviews, fraud prevention, ethics, what's going on from our governance side for our business. These three areas provide those lens for investors that are reviewing your company holistically within these three segments. From a business perspective, ESG reporting, it demonstrates that corporate purpose. It understands what are we doing to create that long-term value. I know we've done a couple ESG reviews in my time, and what we look at is what's our output of acts. When we're looking at the environmental side of stuff, do we have a good social impact? What's our climate risk? What's the pollution output look like? Similar within social is, do we have, labor relation laws? Do we have people that are cross-border experts in understanding what to do? And then finally, with governance, do we have an ethics, procedures? Do we have hotlines? Do we have fraud prevention categories and assets? ESG is I could talk about this. This could be a separate presentation. It honestly could. It's going to just get bigger. I was reading a statistic the other day, and it said that about 74% of finance leaders surveyed would like reporting of ESG performance within metrics. So it's only going to get bigger. It's only going to continue to grow. So staying ahead of the curve of ESG and testing within your environmental, social, and governance aspects of your business are important and are going to continue to be important. And the last item I want to touch on is RPA, or industrial automation. I could talk, again, this could also be a whole separate presentation of what's going on within this space, and especially within internal audit. The usage of bots and the usage of, technology nowadays is just overtaking everything. It's kind of where the business is and where everything's going. I've conducted inventory counts from drones. I've conducted bot type testing where we're implementing bots to do all of the AP procedures and, having checks and balances. We're able to test controls. We're able to utilize the bots as need be. Extremely useful, extremely crucial, specifically within the manufacturing environment. There's, collaborative robots where we're looking at, they help create those faster efficiencies of assisting robotic welding, assisting helping our people close those gaps that could be time consuming. Another one to call out would be dark factories, which would be lights out manufacturing, fully automated production sites. They're on 24/7, 365, little to no human impact. Bots are implemented, bots carry out the procedures, and so on and so forth. And the nice thing about bots is they spit out the testing results. So internal audit is able to stay up to date with everything. Management is able to stay up to date with testing and understanding what's going on with the bots and what's going on with the results holistically. RPA is going to continue to grow and continue to be shaped amongst testing and what's going on within your companies and clients and future companies holistically. Finally, the easiest question of the day is, do you want CPE today? Hoping everybody says, yes, please just send me the certificate, or just answering the polls for fun. Great. And, on my behalf, that's all I have today. Really, really appreciate everybody joining in collaboration. Holistically, my contact information should be shared within the slides. If not, please reach out. I'd love to continue the internal audit conversations, how we can help you all as clients or non-clients, and how we can help add value to the organizations holistically and across management based on the strategies that I talked about today, as well as stuff that I didn't talk on. I'd love to continue this conversation. So please feel free to reach out. I'd love to schedule meetings and kind of get together and talk about the benefits here.
Thank you so much, Tyler. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. As Tyler mentioned, if you have additional questions, you can contact him via the Contact Us box, or you can check off the box and the survey that's going to pop up once the session ends. We appreciate your feedback, so please make sure you do fill in that survey. And you will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's session. Thank you again for attending. Thanks to Tyler and Amy, and I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.